This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Kogar, an elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. Well, hello, everybody. How are you doing today? I'm glad that you've made time to be here today. This is important time. And today we're going to talk about something called the sandwich generation. May not be familiar to you, and you're probably saying, what the heck is that? You know, we've heard of the TV dinner generation. That was me. My parents went off to work and gave me a TV dinner with a terrible brownie in it. But this isn't about food. This is about how we find ourselves in a sandwich. We're raising our kids, we're working hard, and then we're finding ourselves having to care for our parents. So we're getting sandwiched. We're getting squeezed, pressed like a panini probably. And it's tough. We're finding ourselves in multiple roles. Maybe you're there. If you are, that's probably why you're listening. So I'm going to give you some perspective today on that role. If you're finding yourself as a caregiver of your mother, your father, a loved one, maybe a spouse, and you've got multiple roles. More and more of us are finding ourselves called to care for our parents as they age. They're being diagnosed with dementia, Parkinson's, other diseases, and we're finding ourselves as caregiver in a long-term role. And that's why I'm here. As I've mentioned, I'm an elder law attorney and estate planning attorney and a caregiving advocate. I've helped lots of people here in Tennessee, and I want to help you. I find people are really lost when they get a diagnosis like this because they just haven't thought about it before this time. And I understand that. And they just don't know where to start. So I want to share these things on a more broad basis and help people to prepare and to find resources and not have it be so much of a maze of just trying to find information. So that's the reason I'm here. And that's the reason for this podcast. So sandwich generation, that's what we're talking about today. And that is, as I said before, you're working, you're taking care of your family, and now you're taking care of your parents. So you're sandwiched. I've been there too. I mentioned that I wanted to share some stories. And I've got a story here that I found out of the Los Angeles Times. And I'm going to post this on my website, which is at nancykogar.com. So if you want to read the whole story, it's a really good story. It's from a woman named Jacqueline, who was 29 years old. And she was living in New York City, trying to make it in New York as a late night television writer. And obviously she was from LA. And she got a call one day that her mother and her grandmother needed her to come home. And she didn't realize it at the time, but she would become both of their caregivers. And she was 29 years old at the time. So she said she was totally unprepared for that. Didn't expect it. So I want to read a couple excerpts from this, and you may relate to this. I know I did. So listen here. Jacqueline writes, I was on the subway headed to a friend's comedy show on the Lower East Side when I received a call that changed every plan I had for myself. I answered and stepped off the train. And from that moment on, everything moved like lightning. Within a couple of days, I was home, back in Los Angeles. My mother's and grandmother's need for my care was so sudden and so vast that I didn't comprehend that the move would be permanent. At that time, I was living in New York City. My goal was to become a late-night TV writer. I had decided to take a stab at stand-up comedy to improve my speaking skills. As a person who stutters, I thought public speaking would be my greatest fear. Turns out it wasn't. Caregiving means being trusted with the culmination of someone else's life. It's a gift to be allowed to support someone who's approaching the end of their life, but it takes an emotional toll. At 29 years old, I became caregiver to both my mother and grandmother. My grandmother, Joyce, then 78, had been diagnosed with dementia 4 years earlier, and my mother had started showing signs just at 59 years old. I was less than equipped for this journey I was getting ready to take. But now I realized that only time could have taught me the lessons needed to have as a caregiver, and I failed miserably over and over again. I was filled with guilt, resentment, and sorrow as what I had to take on. I felt like God had a personal vendetta against me. It was nearly impossible to describe the continual state of mourning one takes when they become a dementia caregiver unless you've experienced it firsthand. I watched the disease further tear apart my already torn apart family. My grandmother's incredible strong will, her increasing paranoia, the yelling, the refusal to eat. Near the end, everything becomes hard. Being a caregiver to my mother felt like living in a different dimension with a person you've known your entire life. But in this world, they were only fragments of themselves. Caregiving is daunting, but given the right mindset and support system, it's doable, and it can even mold you into a more compassionate, caring, and socially aware person. So that's just a little segment of Jacqueline's story, which I said is going to be on my website, nancykogar.com, so you can read the whole story. And when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm going to offer you some resources if you find yourself in that position as a caregiver and you feel unprepared. So we're going to talk about that. I'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. This is Nancy Kogar, and this is Boomer Time. And today we are talking about the sandwich generation. So if you're a member of the sandwich generation, you're joining me because we are raising young people and we are taking care of older people and we are working in between there. So we are busy, busy people. But we can do it. And today I am offering some resources and some help to you in doing that. And I think perspective is always helpful too. How did we get here? How did we get to having both sides of the young and old? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Of course, we waited longer to get married. And had children later in life, so that's part of the reason. And then the other part of it is what I've talked about before is those baby boomers. There are a lot of you out there, and you're getting older, so that's just going to keep increasing. So that's part of the reason why I want you to be prepared, because this is going to put a lot of pressure on our system. So that is why we are here. So we want to be prepared, and we want your parents to maintain a good quality of life along with you and have the tools you need to get good help and know where to find it. So if this all sounds familiar, of course, you're probably stressed out beyond belief. And I've seen it. I see people come into my office all the time and just say, I do not know where to begin. I am, they're just at a loss. They're thinking, where is the money going to come from? How am I going to do this? I'm not a caregiver. I don't know what to do. It is a challenging time, but you can do it. So there are some steps that you can start to assess what you're doing and really start to plan long term. And there is a difference. There are times when people come into me and they have a more kind of crisis planning, and that's different. But if you're finding yourself in more of a plan where you're starting to see signs and symptoms of decline in your parents or in a loved one, then you have some time. So there's time to plan, and I recommend that. So that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at planning, putting some things in place, and that's what's going to help. So I want to share 6 ways for you to plan and get prepared so that you're not stressed out. Help future you. That's the way I look at it. And help your parents, because they're going to need you. So some of the things that we need to look at is start with your own calendar, okay? It is so overlooked. Look at your daily routine. There are probably some things that you can move around and reprioritize. You may make the same trip to a part of town that you could do in the same day rather than doing it 3 times during the week. Start to reassess your calendar. You would be surprised at how much time you could save. And even if you're taking parents to a doctor's appointment or something like that,
start that from the where you started saying
so
So start that again.
And even if you're taking parents to medical appointments, doctor's appointments, try to do that all in one day. It becomes difficult to get older parents out and in a car and to appointments. That can be quite an ordeal. So if you can get them out, make the most of it. So make appointments, multiple appointments in one day, rather than putting appointments on the calendar sporadically. So really look at your calendar. We're going to talk more about that, but that is something that is underlooked. Is that a word, underlooked? I don't know, but you know what I mean. So I spend a lot of time looking at my calendar. And guess what? There's something else on the calendar that you should look at. Put personal time on the calendar. You need to put time for you on the calendar, okay? Put time for you, because if you don't take care of you, you are not going to be able to take care of your loved ones. So that is very important. You are a human being, so you need nutritious food, adequate sleep, and exercise. Take care of you. Enough said. I do that for myself too. Okay, number 2. Know your rights at your workplace, okay? Start to investigate that, because there are federal laws on the books like the Family Medical Leave Act, okay? That means you can take a leave of absence if you need to. It's not a paid benefit, but you will preserve your job. You will maintain access to your health insurance benefits for up to 12 weeks. If you don't need it now, at least you'll know what you need to do to take it later. Okay? That's there for a reason. So if, say, somebody has a major surgery and you need to be off, have that information now. Okay? I also would suggest that you have a family meeting now. One of the things that often happens is there are unrealistic expectations among family members. I have lots of family members who come in, and there's one person who is doing the plowshare of the caregiving. Okay, that is not uncommon. But before this happens, we should have a family meeting to talk about the family, okay? And I'm going to offer you some resources so that it doesn't turn into a shouting match, crisis, Jerry Springer episode. We don't want that. That doesn't make things better. Okay? But we need some communication. And sometimes it's hard to talk to your parents. Okay? These are very independent folks. So we need some help with that too. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to dedicate a whole episode to that. All right? Now, we also need to talk about money. Money is very important, and it is a huge source of stress. Number one, do you know whether your parents are able to pay for their own care? That is a very important question. They may be able to do that. The second part of that question is, if they can't, are you willing to pay for their care? You don't have to, okay? I know that's always something that comes up, but that's not your responsibility. Maybe consider them moving into your home. That's also not your responsibility, and that's a really important decision, okay? I've gone through that. Guess what? It didn't work. I moved my mother in, and I moved my mother out. So this is coming from somebody that does this all the time, okay? So these are important questions. You need to really find out what your parents have and what they don't have. And unfortunately, this generation has been really secretive in a lot of ways about what they have. So this is some homework you're going to have to do. Also, there's something called long-term care insurance. Not very many people have it, but those that do, it is worth its weight in gold. So find out what they have and what they don't have. Now, along with this, there are issues related to benefits that might be available, and that's a really complex issue too. I will tell you that, there are family members that are cooperative with each other and, can come together and plan a budget where one will contribute, what they're able to, and the others will contribute what they're able to. And then they come up with a plan and are able to make it work. And mom and dad or mom live somewhere based on that combined budget. And that's wonderful. Then sometimes mom or dad live on their Social Security, and that's what they have. And say the Social Security is below what's available for a government entitlement program. So if that's the case, they may be eligible for some benefits. And here in Tennessee, that's called TennCare. TennCare is only available for nursing home benefits. So that's important to know too. So if you're talking about assisted living or, independent living, all those things, that's all out of your pocket, private pay. So if you're looking for government help, only place you're going to have potential access to that is in nursing home care. And I will tell you that when people come into my office and are talking about nursing home care and what can I do to protect my money, I kind of look at it from the reverse. I say, let's look at that as the last resort. Because you don't want to be in a nursing home. Trust me, you do not want to be in a nursing home. I'm looking at that as the final option. And let's work towards a great quality of life using the resources that you've worked your whole entire life to accumulate for your quality of life and care and protecting your legacy. And there are all kinds of options. So that's my perspective. Maybe yours is different, but that's my perspective. And if you need government help and you don't have a lot of money, then that's what it's there for. So, of course, there are VA benefits too, if you're a military veteran, and that's something that's available too. of course, when you get into those government benefits, and it is something that's very complex, more complex than I can get into here, but we will talk about that in another episode. But there are timelines you have to follow. There's transfer issues that you should not do, like don't quit claim your house to your brother or your son. That's not a good idea. But you've got a 5-year look back and some of those things. But anyway, it is important to look at how your assets are titled and what you have and what you don't have. So that is an important piece of this. So here's my big whopper. Okay. This one drives me crazy because I see it all the time. Please, please, please do not do this. I'm begging you. This causes more damage than I can even begin to tell you, okay? Do not do your own estate planning. Please, please, please. Do not do your own estate planning. Okay, what do I mean? Do not do your own will. Do not do your own powers of attorney. Do not do it on the internet. Here's why, okay? So the state I'm in, Tennessee, is what we call a strict statutory state. What does that mean? It means if you don't do it the way the state says, then it's not valid. That's a real risk, okay? So if you don't meet the formalities or the standards that the state requires, then you're out of luck. So I wouldn't want to bank everything I've accumulated over my life on an internet form. No, don't do that to yourself, especially when you're talking about being incapacitated and wanting someone you trust to take care of you. Don't do that to yourself. So, I can't tell you how many times I've seen things that I've tried to fix, but it's too late. It's very upsetting. So, also, do not go to a general practicing attorney to do your estate planning. If you have the option, go to an estate planning attorney. Go to an attorney that understands estate planning. Go to an attorney that understands elder law. Here's why. Because if you go to a general practicing attorney, this attorney does personal injury law, contracts, you name it. They don't have an expertise in estate planning, issues related to aging. You wouldn't go to a brain surgeon who's a podiatrist, right? So please, I'm begging you, this is for your own good. Please, please, please go to someone that understands wills, powers of attorney, so forth. Banks and other entities rather, are getting much more strict about these documents being specific. If they're generic documents, they are not accepting them. So the worst thing that could happen is for you to rely on something that's generic, fill in the blank, or just a generic cookie cutter form, and then you put it in a desk, and 10 years later, you're not able to care for yourself, and your son and daughter bring it out, and guess what? It doesn't work. You don't want that. You don't want that. Then they've got to go down to court and get a conservatorship over you. And guess what? Then they've got to ask the court for everything to take care of you. And it's expensive. There are 3 lawyers involved. Don't do that to yourself, please. So I guess I've preached enough, haven't I? So those are some things to get you started. And believe it or not, with estate planning, 50% of people do not have any estate planning in place. Guess what? If you don't have estate planning in place, guess who controls what happens to your stuff? The government. You don't want the government to control what's happening to your stuff, do you? I don't. So go get it taken care of. It's really not that painful. Actually, when people come to see me, they say, "Oh, that was easy. You made that easy. So go find somebody and get it taken care of. So, all right. Well, these resources are going to be available on my website, nancykogar.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, which is Elder Law News You Can Use. You can find this podcast, of course, if you're listening. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on my website, too. If you want to write to me and tell me something about what we're doing, or you've got an idea for a show, you got a question, you can write to me. Go to nancykogar.com, and there's a way to get in touch with me there. And I'll look forward to hearing from you. So I hope you find some of those resources helpful. And again, you can find those on my website at nancykogar.com. And we will talk about some of those things more specifically and in more in-depth detail, some of the future episodes, because I know those are complex issues. So don't fret if you have questions about some of those things. We will talk more specifically about some of those. So I am going to end this episode with a moment of encouragement and prayer because, as I've said before, caregiving does come with a lot of anxiety and fear of the unknown. And as I've also said, it's my intent to create community here within this podcast. I really want this to be a safe, trusted place, a place of integrity. I'm not going to let anybody in here that I haven't vetted, so that you know that this is a place where you can trust the information that you're getting. That's important to me. And I am going to share my experiences, my knowledge, and things I've learned over the years. And this is a place where you, I hope, will share your stories. I'm going to share relevant news stories that I think are important for you. You can ask questions. And as I said, find encouragement. So I am a person of faith too, and I do want to pray for you. So I'm going to end with a moment of encouragement and prayer. So I'm just going to ask God to give us comfort in our minds during these times of increasing anxiety in the world and in our lives, that God would give us peace as we prepare to act as caregivers for our loved ones, whether they be parents, grandparents, spouses, even friends. Just help us to have a calm and deliberate spirit to seek out the resources that we need in order to be a competent caregiver and find what we need in order to help and provide the care and help that they need. And help me, as the host of this podcast, to continue to share the items and resources that are helpful to those listening and need help. Most of all, bless all those out there who are listening and need your help. Amen. Thank you, my friends. I hope you will continue to listen. Please remember that every day is a gift. Cherish it, celebrate it, and we are going to walk this caregiving journey together. You are not alone. This is Nancy Kogar, and this is Boomer Time. See you next time.